In the summer of 2020, I was working from home writing a report when I got a phone call from a fellow journalist. "Is there an FIR against you?" he asked. The police write FIRs when they begin investigating crimes. The FIR against me said I had broken India's strict anti-discrimination law by mocking the poverty of a woman from a marginalized community by misquoting her in one of my reports. That meant I could be arrested any time for a crime I had not committed. I had a recording to show I had quoted the woman accurately. The woman you see here with her 5 kids, that's Mala Devi, a sanitation worker who had struggled to feed her family during the COVID lockdown. There was nothing unusual about her story. Millions of Indians had gone hungry that summer as work and wages had disappeared overnight. But what had made Mala Devi's story newsworthy was that she lived in a village adopted by India's Prime Minister as part of a program to create model villages. A direct connection with the country's top leader had not protected the people of this village from hunger. I'm not sure who was offended by my report. Surely it was not Mala Devi. She could not read. But the FIR did not surprise me. Ever since Narendra Modi became the Prime Minister of India in 2014, it had become fairly common for activists and journalists to be booked in false cases. And so I did not feel anything. No anger, no outrage, not even fear. Instead, I began thinking of all the things I needed to pack for prison: a toothbrush, sanitary napkins, books. My boss, the editor of Scroll, Naresh Fernandez, called and suggested that I leave my house just in case the police were on their way to arrest me. When I didn't budge, he got a celebrated human rights lawyer to call. She said, "Supriya, why make it easy for them? At least let them look for you." And so, at the crack of dawn, I left my house, not knowing that I wouldn't be able to return for 2 months. That's how long it took the lawyers to get me protection from arrest. All things considered, the case was a minor inconvenience. I did not go to jail. But under Modi, many others have. The faces you see here are of civil rights activists who spent years in jail. Some are still behind bars because they have been arrested under draconian laws that make it nearly impossible to get bail. Even journalists have not been spared. Siddique Kappan was on his way to cover protests against a rape case in a state ruled by Modi's party when he was arrested under the anti-terror law. He spent 28 months in jail. Mohammed Zubair, a fact-checker, was arrested on grounds that one of his tweets insulted Hindu sentiments. The tweet was 4 years old, the image in it older still, from a comedy film from the 1980s. For 40 years, no one's sentiments had been hurt, but suddenly they were, because the government wanted to go after a journalist. Apart from being journalists, Kappan and Zubair share another thing in common. They're both Muslim. So are many of the jailed activists. And here the story gets complex, so please bear with me. India, as you might know, is a Hindu-majority country, but our founding leaders gave us a secular constitution that guarantees equal rights to all citizens, regardless of religion or creed. I grew up in a Hindu family, which takes great pride in the fact that our country is multi-ethnic, multilingual, multi-religious. But Hindu supremacists never liked this. In their imagination, India was a glorious Hindu civilization ravaged by Muslim and Christian invaders. Inspired by Hitler and Mussolini, they wanted to establish a muscular Hindu First Nation. Modi is a product of that ideology. I first heard about it when I was 12, when Hindu supremacist mobs tore down a 4-century-old mosque called the Babri Masjid. Hundreds were killed in the violence that followed. But the violence and the demolition were condemned by everyone across the political spectrum. In 2002, I became a journalist and began traveling around my subcontinent-sized country. I was blown away by the sheer diversity of people, languages, opinions. I quickly discovered that it's far tougher to take on corporations than politicians. In fact, it was fairly easy for us to question the government. And that's what we did in the run-up to the 2014 election, spotlighting every failure of the incumbent Congress government. The Congress lost that election, and in its place came the BJP, or the Bharatiya Janata Party, the Hindu supremacist party whose supporters had torn down the mosque 2 decades ago. The leader of the BJP, Narendra Modi, was until then best known as the Chief Minister of Gujarat, who in 2002 had allowed Hindu rioters to kill over 1,000 Muslims. At that time, when the BBC interviewed him and asked what he would have done differently, he had said, "One area where I was very, very weak, that was how to handle the media." Now, as Prime Minister of the country, Modi was not going to repeat that mistake. And so, as his party and government have gone about recasting India into an orthodox, illiberal Hindu nation where you can be killed for the food you eat, jailed if you love someone from another community, where discrimination is now written into the law, Modi has ensured the media is on his side. He's done this by deploying the usual tricks. When a broadcast network did not fall in line, a network I worked for at the start of my career, it was bought over by an oligarch close to Modi, who, by the way, is now Asia's second richest man. India not only has the world's largest population living in poverty, it also has the 3rd highest number of billionaires. There's a lot to ask, a lot to question, but our Prime Minister has not taken a single press conference in 12 years. He was here in Oslo recently. When a journalist tried asking him why he doesn't take questions, she got no response. Instead, she was trolled and doxed online, something we've grown used to in India. In this environment, some people ask, how are you guys at Scroll still able to do your work? Good question. My hunch is that with big media captured, the government does not mind having some small and independent media around. It helps maintain the fiction that India is the world's largest democracy with a free press. But the free press has been shrinking year after year. Our newsroom is down to 1/3 of its size 10 years ago. We aren't scared, we are tired. When hate and violence are normalized in a society, it leaves you feeling numb. Our main challenge is how to fight this numbness. Our second challenge is how to find the resources to do our work. The first challenge is on us, and we're committed, no matter what, to bear witness and speak truth to power, even if power is not listening. But the second challenge, you can help us with it. Remember, 1/6 of humanity lives in India. If you care for democracy, support us. Thank you.